Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, counter-spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
Jimmy Stewart as the six-shooter, an episode about Sheriff Billy as it was originally broadcast. That's 69 years ago, November 29th, 1953. And we thank you for tuning in. On this Tuesday, this is the 29th day of November, 333rd day of the year, 32 days remaining. Thomas Edison demonstrated his phonograph for the first time in 1877. In 1890, at West Point, the U.S. Naval Academy defeated the U.S. Military Academy 24-0 in the first Army-Navy game. Fire destroyed most of the buildings on Santa Catalina Island in California in 1915. North Korean and Chinese troops forced the United Nations forces to retreat from North Korea on this date in 1950. It was on this date in 1952 President-elect Dwight Eisenhower fulfilled a campaign promise by traveling to Korea to find out what can be done to end the war.
Over the frozen Korean countryside, the general's plane flies in. A salute from the troops, and onto the icy runway steps Ike to be greeted by Major General Pollock. General Mark Clark, the United Nations Supreme Commander in the Far East, is also there to greet him. During his 3-day stay in Korea, Ike is determined to meet as many veterans from the battlefront as he can, and from their experiences plan a way of ending this bitter conflict.
Little newsreel audio there. In 1961 on this date, the Mercury Atlas V spacecraft launched with Enos, a chimpanzee, aboard.
Flight is a success, though the trip is held to 2 circuits of the Earth. The chimp's cabin began to heat up, a condition an astronaut could have corrected. So control officers decided to bring him down before he completed his 3rd trip. He landed in the sea south of Bermuda and is brought to the islands for quick medical checks before he is taken back to Cape Canaveral for a thorough examination. Scientists are elated at the condition of both chimp and capsule. They came through the test in a manner that brings a manned flight closer to reality for the U.S. space team.
Enos flying around the world on this date in 1961. President Johnson established the Warren Commission on this date in 1963 to investigate the assassination of President Kennedy. In 1967, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara announced his resignation from office.
In less than 60 days, I will have served 7 years as Secretary of Defense. No one of my predecessors has served so long. I myself did not plan to. I've done so because of my feeling of obligation to the President and to the nation, although I have felt for some time that there would be benefits from the appointment of a fresh person. On the 18th of April, Mr. George Woods, President of the World Bank, told me he wished to recommend me as his successor. He asked whether I would be interested. I replied I had not thought of the possibility before he mentioned it to me, but that I was interested in the economic development of the less developed countries, and that I did believe that the work of the bank in this respect was vital to the stability of relations among all nations.
As you heard McNamara say, he was taking a position as the head of the World Bank. He resigned on this date in 1967. In 1972, Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, released Pong, the first commercially successful video game, in Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale, California. In 1975, the name Microsoft for microcomputer software, first used in a letter from Bill Gates to Paul Allen. In 1981, actress Natalie Wood drowned during a boating accident off Santa Catalina Island, California.
Shortly after midnight, Miss Wood was discovered missing from the yacht. The parties aboard searched for her, and during that search discovered that a 14-foot Zodiac dinghy was missing. The U.S. Coast Guard was contacted, and a water search was conducted with negative results. At 6 a.m., the Sheriff's Aero Bureau was requested to make an aerial and land search. At 7:44 a.m., a Sheriff's helicopter observer located a body floating 200 yards offshore.
Now, doubts have caused police to reopen the investigation into Wood's death 37 years later. Husband Robert Wagner considered to be a person of interest in the case. And in 2001, the quiet Beatle, George Harrison, died of lung cancer.
I'm devastated, obviously, like everyone is. He had a long battle with his cancer, but I saw him a few weeks ago, and he was full of fun, like he always was. He's such a brave lad. To me, he's just my little baby brother. We grew up together, and I knew him in my old hometown, Liverpool. And we just had so many beautiful times together that's what I'm going to remember him by. A lovely guy who's full of humour, as I say, even when I saw him last time, and he was obviously very unwell. He was still cracking jokes like he always was, and he'll be sorely missed. He's a beautiful man, and the world will miss him. So that's really all I can manage to say at the moment.
Paul McCartney on Harrison's death at just the age of 58. Other people passing away on this date in history: Zeppo Marx, the fifth Marx brother, also Cary Grant, Gene Rayburn, pro wrestler Moondog Spot, the father of Drew Barrymore, John Drew Barrymore, Wendy Jo Sperber, and the Freebirds' Buddy Roberts. No, not the musicians, the wrestlers. This is the birth date of a number of people of note, including Louisa May Alcott, film director, choreographer Busby Berkeley, civil rights leader Adam Clayton Powell, country singer Merle Travis, TV personality Dagmar, Vin Scully, who we lost just a few months ago at the age of 94, politician Paul Simon, not the musician, also from Firesign Theater, Peter Bergman, and Gary Shandling, all born on this date in history. Well, did you know that Chuck Mangione still feels so good at the age of 82 today? Pro wrestler, commentator, and now podcaster. Dutch Mantell, 73 years old. Of course, he's basically retired from the ring, but he tells some great stories. Also, pro wrestler, and yes, he is still active, Jerry Lawler, surviving a heart attack, and yet he still gets in the ring. He's 73 today. Howie Mandel, the Deal or No Deal on CNBC, and also America's Got Talent. Howie, 67 today. Also from NYPD Blue, Kim Delaney, 61. From St. Elmo's Fire and Pretty in Pink, Andrew McCarthy, 60 years old. War Machine in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Don Cheadle, 58. Another retired pro wrestler today, John Layfield, known as JBL in the WWE, 56 today. From the Scary Movie parody franchise, Anna Faris is 46. And currently active WWE wrestler Dana Brooke, 34. Those some of the people celebrating the 29th day of November is their birthday. If this is your birthday...
Hi, we're the Four Freshmen, and we just want to say, Happy birthday to you!
And from 69 years ago today, November 29th, 1953, Jimmy Stewart as the six-shooter on this Tuesday, Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station. Now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, we go back 69 years to Sunday, November 29th, 1953, and an episode of Jimmy Stewart as the six-shooter.
James Stewart as the six-shooter. The man in the saddle is angular and long-legged. His skin is sun-dyed brown. The gun in his holster is gray steel and rainbow mother of pearl, its handle unmarked. People call them both the six-shooter. The NBC Radio Network presents James Stewart as the six-shooter, a transcribed series of radio dramas based on the life of Britt Ponsett, the Texas plainsman who wandered through the Western Territories, leaving behind a trail of still-remembered legends.
snow was beginning to melt by the time I reached Dawson. You could hear it dripping from the eaves, hitting the boardwalk along the main street. I'd figured on being in town a couple of days earlier, but that storm sort of threw me off schedule. Not that I had to be there any particular day, but my winter job at Dave Engelman's ranch would be waiting for me whenever I showed up. But the sooner I got to Dave's, the sooner we could start moving his herd down to lower ground. So, Scar. Oh, boy. Well, it was almost noon, so I tied Scar to the hitching rail in front of Brick Vining's gambling hall and went hunting a place to eat. The town was sort of showing a little wear and tear. Of course, Dawson never had been a rich place, and I guess the drought last summer hadn't helped much. Folks just didn't have the money for improving the real estate, that's all. Except the jail. Huh. Gee, for a minute I couldn't believe my eyes. Well, it was all fixed up. Fresh green paint on the outside, new wooden steps leading up to the front door. Real honest-to-goodness bars in the cell windows. It sure was a different jail, all right. But the face grinning out at me from behind those cast-iron bars, well, that face hadn't changed a bit since the last time I was in Dawson.
Howdy, Brett.
Hello, Milt.
I heard you was coming to town. Dave Engelman said you signed up with him.
Yeah, that's right. You in for something, Milt?
Oh, there's a little ruckus over at Brick Vining's place last night. Some folks said I started it.
Uh-huh.
Reckon they're right.
You do. It seems to me like you were in jail when I left Dawson a couple of years back. Isn't that...
Was it Saturday night or Sunday morning?
Could have been. I don't remember exactly.
Well, if it was a Saturday night or Sunday morning, like as not, I was here. I ain't missed being thrown in more than 2 Saturday nights since they first built the place.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least you're living in style. George, this jail looks a lot fancier than it used to be.
Yes, yeah. New sheriff fixed it all up.
New sheriff, huh?
Sure. Oh, you heard about Saul Gordon being killed, didn't you?
No. Well, what happened?
Oh, well, it happened, maybe a couple of months ago. And, well, come on inside and have a look around while I tell you about it.
Well, I don't know about that, Milt. You know, maybe the new sheriff wouldn't care about it.
Oh, Sheriff Billy wouldn't mind. He'd like you to pay us a visit. Now, come on, Brett. The front door's unlocked.
Well, all right.
That's some desk, ain't it? Solid mahogany. He had it shipped here, all the way from Frisco.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm. He paid for it out of his own pocket, too, Billy did. Town couldn't afford a desk like that.
Oh, no. Don't suppose it could. Well, what about Saul? What happened to him?
Well, like I said, it was around 2 months ago. The Baxter brothers had been seen heading this way from White Eagle. When Sheriff Gordon heard about it, he got some men together and started looking for him.
Mm-hmm.
Young Billy hadn't been in town very long. He wasn't obliged to join the posse, but he went anyway. Billy Riddle. That's his name, Britt.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't a very big posse, and when one of them Baxters shot the sheriff, well, that'd have been the end of it if Billy hadn't have took charge. Why, he managed to get off a couple of shots, and the next thing you know, both of them Baxter boys surrendered. So when Billy come back to town, well, nobody else was very anxious for the job of sheriff, so he seemed to be the logical man for it. You know, the way he handled the posse and all.
Sure,
Of course, some of the folks thought he was a little young for the job. Well, can't be more than 22 or 23. But he's got a good, firm grip on himself.
He does.
Oh, he ought to be showing up about now. He always turns me loose in time from a Sunday dinner. Real nice young fella. You'll like him. Southern boy.
Oh?
Yeah, I don't know why he came out west exactly. Good thing for the town he did, though. Oh, howdy, Sheriff, howdy. Oh, we're just talking about you. This here's Britt Ponsett.
Ponsett?
Oh, that's right. You've heard of him, ain't you? He's six-shooter.
Oh, sure. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Ponsett.
Howdy, Sheriff. I just strolling by and Milt asked me to come inside.
Glad you did. Well, Milt, I reckon you'd like to be on your way.
Oh, I don't know, Sheriff. This jail's getting to be a darn sight more comfortable than my cabin. What with all your improvements?
Well, if you want to stay...
Oh, on second thought, I'd better be getting home now. Thanks for the hospitality anyway.
Don't mention it.
You heading my direction, Brad?
Well, if you don't mind, Mr. Ponsett, I'd like to talk to you. Just for a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Well, so long, then. See you next Saturday, Sheriff.
Sure.
Goodbye, Mel.
I trust I'm not keeping you from anything, sir.
No. I was just thinking about eating a little dinner, maybe, if there's a cafe open.
Old Cotton serves a pretty good meal on Sunday.
That's
Cotton
all?
White, yeah. His place is right around the corner.
Fine. Well, I'll give that a try. You wouldn't care to join me, would you? We could talk while we're eating. That is, if you don't have any other plans.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Ponsett. I'd like to join you. You see, I'd been hoping you'd turn up in Dawson.
By George, I sure was a nice tender pot roast, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy, I ate too much, though. My belt's cutting into me like a cinch here. Wait, What was it you had in your mind, Billy?
My name's Riddle, Mr. Ponsett. Bill Riddle.
Yeah, Milt told me.
The name doesn't mean anything to you?
No, not offhand.
I heard a lot about you, Mr. Ponsett, since I came to Dawson. Folks say you've traveled a lot around this part of the country. Covered it all, from one end to the other.
Boy, I've done my share of moving about.
What I wanted to know was if you ever ran into anybody else with the same last name as me.
Riddle?
Blake Riddle. That's the full name.
Relative?
My father.
Oh.
It's not a very common name. If you heard it, you'd be likely to remember it.
Yes.
Here's your pie, Sheriff. But watch that plate, though. It's hot.
Thanks, God.
No, I don't think I ever heard that name before.
Well, I wanted to be sure.
Was your father in these parts?
I don't know. I know he was once. Not here in Dawson, but somewhere in this territory.
Mm-hmm. You haven't heard from him lately?
No, I've never heard from him.
Oh?
Fact of the matter is, I've never even seen him. You see, he brought my mother out west here before I was born. Wasn't the kind of life she'd been used to. She was born and raised in the South. Family had a plantation.
I see.
In those days, the frontier must have been pretty wild. Anyway, when it came time for me to be born, she went back home.
And your father didn't go with her?
No. Maybe they had a quarrel. Maybe he didn't like her leaving him. I don't know. Later on, she told me he was dead. But I found out that wasn't true. At least it wasn't true when she told me.
Oh?
Anyhow, Mother died last year. In her things was a letter from Dad. It had been mailed from Denver about 15 years ago. Said he was going to buy a ranch somewhere around Phoenix. He asked Mother to bring me along and meet him. From the way it was written, you could kind of tell he didn't expect her to come.
Yeah. Well, some folks don't bear up very well when they're transplanted, you know. They take root in one place, and there's no point in trying to move.
Yeah, I reckon they just weren't suited. But now, well, I thought maybe if Dad was still alive, I thought maybe he and I... Tell you the truth, Mr. Ponsett, I guess I'm his son, even though I never saw him. More his than Mother's.
I see.
And ever since I can remember, I've wanted to come west, even before I knew about him. And I've been happy out here, too, happier than I've ever been in my life. Of course, I didn't figure on being sheriff. That was just an accident.
Well, be that as it may, you're the sheriff, and Milt says you're a darn good one, so you've at least got one satisfied customer, huh?
I'm going to try, Mr. Ponsett. I'm going to try hard. I just wish that Dad... Well, if you should ever run into him, why...
Sure. What the Sam Hill's that?
Sounds like somebody's getting frisky.
There he goes, Sheriff. Over by the mercantile.
Yeah.
Oh, he ain't doing no harm. He's just shooting up in the air that way.
Ain't doing no good either.
Looks like he's running out of lead. Yes, there he goes. Into Brick Vining's place.
Put the dinners on my bill, Cotton. I'll pay you for them later.
Sure, Sheriff.
Well, hold up a minute, Billy.
Yeah?
Hey, didn't you recognize that fellow, the one's doing the shooting?
What? No. Why should I?
Well, his name is Ben Reed.
Reed? You sure, Mr. Ponset?
Yeah, I'm sure.
I thought he was in jail over at Fort Lyon. I thought the marshal arrested him last month.
Well, Ben Reed's been in a lot of jails, but he always sort of manages to break out somehow, you know.
He won't break out of mine.
Famous last words, November 29, 1953, to the six-shooter on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Thanks for being with us here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. We're listening to an episode of The Six-Shooter starring Jimmy Stewart as it was broadcast Sunday, November 29, 1953. In the newspapers of that Sunday 69 years ago, these are some of the headlines. Gruesome evidence of communist atrocities in Korea, including the torture and murder of American soldiers, will be heard and seen at a Senate inquiry next week. Senator Potter, the Republican from Michigan, who's in charge of the investigation, said he has been working closely with the White House and Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., the American ambassador to the United Nations, in preparation for the public hearings. The story to be told, Potter said, won't be pleasant, but it's something that should be known by all Americans. An official record of red horrors in Korea, death marches, mass burnings, tortures, and beatings inflicted by communists on UN soldiers and Korean civilians, was put before the United Nations delegates yesterday by the U.S. Survivors told about unwary and helpless prisoners being shot down outside a Korean tunnel as they waited patiently with their rice bowls for promised food. Others said the Reds seemed to get great joy out of letting us know they had the upper hand. They said the prisoners were a three-ring circus for the enemy. Others reported the communists killed weak prisoners by clumsy injections of a mysterious solution. Former President Harry S. Truman said last night any politician or public figure who spreads division and distrust, who engages in smears and undermines public confidence, is directly aiding and abetting the communist design. Without naming names, Truman said the struggle for freedom must be preserved against the reckless assaults of unprincipled politicians. He added, we must strive to preserve it against the insidious onslaughts of fear and hysteria which are being manipulated in this country for purely political reasons. A photo engraver's strike, backed by other newspaper employees yesterday, halted publication of 6 major newspapers in New York City and idled 20,000 workers. Ordinarily active city rooms stood strangely silent and presses motionless with no immediate sign of any settlement in the wage dispute. Hollywood star Ginger Rogers had that silken satin look on her arrival in London from Paris. Accompanied by her husband Jacques Bergerac, she will co-star with him in a romantic film to be made in England in the near future. And though some of the day's top news stories, as reported in the newspapers of Sunday, November 29th, 1953, on your radio, Jimmy Stewart and the Six-Shooter, which continues now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
You gonna arrest him, Sheriff? He's an outlaw, ain't he?
Why, sure, but he's mighty fast with a gun. At least so I hear. Ain't that right, Mr. Ponset?
Yeah, that's what folks say.
Well, I guess there's only one way to find out.
Sheriff Billy was young, all right, but he didn't walk young, and he didn't swagger. He just moved ahead like a man who knew where he was going. Of course, being a few years older wouldn't have done him any harm, especially if he was going to tangle with Ben Reed, and, well, there didn't seem to be any reason for me to miss all the excitement, so I started off in the direction of the gambling hall. If young Bill didn't know what he was doing, well, he'd soon find out. Ben Reed was sitting at a poker table dealing the cards. He didn't even look up when Bill came over and stood beside him. But Ben knew somebody was there, and he knew whoever it was wearing a star. He laid the deck of cards on the table, and he rested his left hand on his knee. Gee whiz, I sure hope Billy knew that Ben was left-handed.
Your name's Reed? Ben Reed?
You talking to me?
I asked if you're Ben Reed.
Yeah, I'm Reed.
You broke out of jail over at Fort Lyon.
Don't look like I'm still there, does it, Sonny?
And you're going back.
Oh.
You're under arrest.
I heard this town got themselves a new sheriff. Some youngster wasn't even dry behind the ears.
Get on your feet.
Sure. You know, most fellas your age have a lot to live for. They'd be sort of careful who they started ordering around, but maybe you're different.
Maybe I am.
What's your name, kid? Just for the record, I always like to know a man's name before there's any trouble.
Bill Riddle. Sheriff Bill Riddle. Give me your gun, Reed. I said, give me your gun.
For a couple of minutes they stood there, not moving, staring at each other. Then Ben Reed's left hand slid down his hip a couple inches. And in spite of myself, I found my own hand going for my holster. And then Ben's fingers stopped. And I couldn't believe my eyes. He unbuckled his gun belt and let it drop on the floor. Well, I guess the only person in that room who wasn't surprised was Billy. He just picked up those guns. He nodded to the door. Ben didn't even look back. He marched right out into the street and Billy behind him. There was a minute or so before it sank in just what had happened. Sheriff Billy Riddle had arrested Ben Reed without even drawing his gun.
We'll return to James Stewart as the six-shooter in just a moment.
From 69 years ago, November 29th, 1953, the six-shooter on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. We'll hear from Henry Aldrich on Wednesday's Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, going back 70 years to November 30th, 1952. Henry's father is sick. Henry's father, House Jameson, is under the weather, but some people think it's more serious than that. Bobby Ellis is the last Henry Aldrich in the Aldrich family, 70 years ago on tomorrow's Classic Radio Theater. But now the conclusion of Jimmy Stewart and the Six-Shooter from 69 years ago, November 29th, 1953.
Now, Act 2 of The Six-Shooter, starring James Stewart as Britt Ponsett.
About 2 o'clock that Sunday afternoon, the snow started coming down again. Big, real big, heavy snow. So I left Scar at the livery stable and got myself a room at Mrs. Kramer's boarding house. Yeah, I sure didn't like the idea of going out for supper, but Mrs. Kramer said that she didn't fix food on Sunday nights. She was lead soprano in the church choir, and rain or snow, she had to be there for the evening service. There wasn't anybody else who could carry the melody. So I put on just about all the clothes I had with me and headed for Cotton White's Cafe.
Howdy, Mr. Ponsett. Oh, sure is coming down, ain't it?
Yeah.
We don't usually get a big snow like this before January or maybe February. It seems like the weather's changing. I wonder what's causing it.
I don't know, Cotton. Don't know. I was afraid you might be closed.
No, I would be, except for these lunches I'm packing. Yeah, the sheriff caught me just as I was locking the door.
Oh?
The idea of leaving for Fort Lyon in a blizzard like this.
Fort Lyon?
That's where he says he's going.
Well, what for?
Wants to turn Ben Reed over to the marshal there. He sure is in a big hurry to get rid of him for some reason. Just don't make sense. Like as not, they'll never make it to Lyon, either one of them. But Billy says they're starting tonight, so... well, no, that does it. Oh, I'll just run these over to jail. You can pour yourself a cup of coffee, Mr. Ponson. I'll be right back.
Well, why not let me take them over for you, Carter? Since I'm all bundled up and everything.
Oh, of course not, Mr. Ponson.
No trouble. Besides, I'd kind of like to have a talk with Bill before he leaves town.
Well, if you're sure.
And don't stay open for me. I'll just get a cup of coffee from Mrs. Cream. That's all I wanted anyway. Good night.
Good night, Mr. Ponson.
Thanks for bringing them over, Mr. Ponson. Good night.
Hey, Billy, you serious about striking out for Fort Lyon tonight?
Yeah.
Well, it looks to me like he's as safe here as he would be anywhere else.
Guess he don't appreciate my company.
That's right. I don't.
Well, you're the sheriff.
Yeah.
Fort Lyon's a 2-day ride in good weather. No telling how long it'll take you to get in a storm like this.
Don't worry about that.
Was something happened, Billy?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, I guess it's none of my business, whatever it is.
No, it isn't. Sorry, Mr. Ponson. Oh, what's the use? Somebody will find out sooner or later. I'm not taking him to Fort Lyon. As soon as we get out of town, I'm going to turn him loose.
What?
And I'm not coming back to Dawson. I'm going home to Georgia, where I belong.
Well, I suppose you've got your reasons.
I told you. I only came out here to find my father. And I told you this was my lucky day. I found him. Of course, he wasn't quite what I expected. He's a thief, an outlaw, and a killer.
You mean Reed?
You knew it too, didn't you?
No, I didn't know anything of the kind.
Well, you must have guessed it then. When he let me take him without lifting a finger to stop me. You said yourself he was fast with a gun.
Well, I said that's what I heard. But the fact a man lets another man arrest him, well, that doesn't necessarily prove kinship.
I got the proof right here.
What?
Yeah.
Well, that's a mighty pretty locket.
Open it up.
Huh?
Go on, open it. That's my mother's picture when she was a girl. It's copied from a picture that hangs in our parlor back home. And he was carrying it fastened to his gun belt.
That's all, Reed?
His name isn't Reed. It's Blake Riddle.
He's loco, Ponson. Ask anybody. I'm Ben Reed. I always have been.
You're a fool to lie about it. If you weren't Blake Riddle, you'd be going to prison.
I've been in prison before.
And because you think he's your father, you're going to turn him loose. Is that it, Billy?
I don't care about him or anything that happens to him. But she loved him once. At least she must have thought she did.
And afterwards, you're getting out of town, huh?
I don't reckon Dawson would have much use for a sheriff who was Ben Reed's kid.
Well, they wouldn't have to know.
I'd know it. I'd always know it. Even if they didn't.
Well, the town was mighty proud of you, Billy.
Well, at least I won't be the first lawman who couldn't hang on to Ben Reed.
No, that's true enough. It just seems to me you're acting on mighty flimsy evidence. It seems to me there's a lot of ways a man could get a hold of a locket like this one. It wouldn't necessarily follow that he really belongs to him. Of course, if Reed says it's his...
I ain't said that. He never asked me.
I didn't have to ask.
Well, what about it, Reed? Where'd you get it?
I had it so long I almost forgot.
Yeah.
But it all come back to me when you was making such a fuss. Never thought a piece of junk like that would cause so much stir.
Go on.
I found it. must be about 15 years ago now, maybe more. I was down around Phoenix, a little town named Court City. There were some other boys with me, and folks sort of got the idea we'd held up the bank. Come looking for us with a posse. Well, there was a couple hours of shooting, and afterwards the posse went back without us. Those that were still alive, that is.
What's all this got to do with
Let him finish, Bill.
Well, we went out to look at the bodies, just to make sure the fellas were dead. One of them was carrying that locket, so I...
Are you trying to say you killed my father?
I don't know who killed him, not for certain. We was all shooting. I suppose it could have been me.
You're lying.
Well, why should he lie?
If it's the truth, why did he keep that locket? Wasn't worth anything. Didn't have any value.
Well,
why'd he keep it?
I'll tell you, kid. When I opened it up and looked at it, I said to myself, now, she's pretty nice looking. So I thought, seeing as how the fellow who was carrying the locket was sort of out of action, and maybe someday I might run into the woman in person having her picture, it'd sort of give me an excuse.
You filthy rotten! I'd kill you with my bare hands.
Bill, now, get hold of yourself.
How could I ever have thought that a dirty, rotten killer would be my own? I must have been crazy, plumb crazy.
You sure were. The idea of a kid of mine turning out to be a sheriff.
It took Billy Riddle a little while to simmer down. When he finally did, he changed his mind about going to Fort Lyon. He decided to wait until the storm had died down, till he was sure of delivering the prisoner. Reed didn't say anything, not another word. Not until Bill went out back to get some wood for the pot-bellied stove.
Why are you looking at me like that, Ponce? You didn't believe me, did you?
Not entirely, Reed. No, not entirely.
Why not?
Well, for one thing, I was in Court City when you robbed that bank, and it wasn't 15 years ago. It was about 4 years ago. And the posse that went out after you, well, they didn't even get close to you. They came back, and all of them hadn't fired a shot.
Well...
And there was another, I think you'd call it discrepancy.
What's that?
I knew all those boys in that posse, and none of them was named Riddle.
Well, one thing was true enough. The important thing.
Oh?
His father is dead. And I killed him.
What?
20 years ago, when his mother went off and left me, when she wouldn't come back, when she wouldn't even answer my letters, that's when I killed the man his father had been. I didn't think I had anything to live for. I didn't think I'd ever see Billy. I didn't think I'd ever see him as long as I lived. That's when I turned outlaw and became Ben Reed. That's when I killed Blake Riddle.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. But as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot more of Blake Riddle here tonight than there is of Ben Reed. At least that's the way it appears to me. Well, it was a couple of days before that storm let up, and Sheriff Billy could take him over to the marshal at Fort Lyon. And he got him there, too. No trouble at all. Of course, a lot of folks said that afterwards Ben Reed would just break out of jail again like he always had before, but, you know, so far he hasn't even tried to. People just don't understand it. He's practically a model prisoner.
The Six Shooter is an NBC Radio Network production in association with Review Productions. It is based on a character created by Frank Burt, and the transcribed story is written by him. Mr. Stewart may currently be seen in the Universal International picture The Glenn Miller Story. Others in the cast were James McCallion, Ken Christie, Howard McNear, and Alan Reed. Special music for this program was by Basil Adlam, and the entire production is under the direction of Jack Johnstone. All characters and incidents were fictitious, and any resemblance to actual characters or incidents is purely coincidental. This is Hal Gibney speaking.
"69 years ago today, November 29th, 1953, Jimmy Stewart, the six-shooter, here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. We thank you for making us a part of your day. Would you do me a favor and visit my friend Ted at RadioMemories.com. I haven't mentioned Ted in a while. He's got a whole new collection of classic radio programs that have been restored audio-wise so that they sound probably better than they did when they were originally broadcast on cassette, CD, or flash drive for your computer. That's at RadioMemories.com. My webpage, classicradio.stream. Stream our shows on demand. Learn about classic radio collecting. You can also find our social media links there, and you can contact me, and you can even buy me a coffee. The Buy Me a Coffee money goes to two things. Number one, to help us acquire additional classic radio theater programs for you here, but also to make sure our distribution channels stay up and running. That's at classicradio.stream. Classicradio.stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank this station. Support their advertisers and tell your friends that great radio shows are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.